Greetings, folks. Joseph Kursky here with you to talk about an example of how to use Business Analyst Web App in an instructional setting. If you're teaching business, economics, geography, GIS, and other subjects, sociology, you can use these tools effectively to teach key concepts and generate skills at the same time. So under the Higher Education ESRI Business Education landing page, under Curriculum, I have an essay talking about hands-on activities. One of the hands-on activities, which is the subject of this particular video, is a lesson I worked on with a professor at a major university who's interested in communication and business both. So we curated this lesson called Finding the Optimal Location for an Artomat Art Dispensing Machine. It's written for the university level, but you can also use it at the upper secondary level, as I'm indicating here in the lesson itself. 3 class periods of 50 minutes each. No previous experience with GIS is necessary, but some background in why GIS matters and the whys of where and looking at spatial patterns, relationships, and trends. So the Philadelphia Arts Council has hired you to recommend 2 sites in the central part of the city for a retrofitted, formerly known as a cigarette dispensing machine, now turned into a machine that you can dispense art with, location. One of the requirements in this lesson is the students need to read about Petco and how they improve their location decisions with geospatial technology, namely geographic information systems. Also have the students look at the business page at ESRI. Why do people use GIS to make smart business decisions? That's the subject of these 2 background readings before the students actually get into the lesson. I think these foundational readings are important, so it's not just getting them to be GIS savvy and clicking on buttons and tools. That's not the whole point. The point is to get them thinking spatially about patterns, relationships, and trends. So the analysis part, considering what you read in the articles, add your own previous knowledge, provide 3 reasons why GIS and the spatial perspective is important in business. Then here's the meat of the assignment right here. These factors are going to be what you considered. Ordered from an Etsy website, went to a museum, went to an art gallery, did any painting or drawing. So these are the 4 criteria. They could have been other criteria. We wanted to narrow it to a fairly short but yet key set of criteria. So I've moved that data into Business Analyst, from Business Analyst Web App into ArcGIS Online. Why? Because the students actually at this university didn't have access to Business Analyst Web App. So I moved the data into ArcGIS Online so that other additional people could access the lesson and the data, including the professor's students, which were the primary audience for this right away. But I hope that you will be able to use this lesson too. I trust that you will be able to. So the students actually look at this inside ArcGIS Online. It's an index value for each one of these 4 variables. So in other words, the mean for the USA is 100. So anything above 100 is more than that variable, that behavior in this case, is on the average for the whole USA. So did painting, you can reverse sort this. So if it's 142, it means that 42%, people in this neighborhood are 42% more likely to have done some painting in the last 6 or 12 months than the general population of the US. I've got 548 records in this particular data set, so keeping it fairly small and focused on central Philadelphia. Could you do this for other cities? Of course you could. But this particular lesson is focused on Philadelphia, just to keep things small and doable. But yes, you can do this in other locations. And you can pick other variables too. These are just the variables that the professor was interested in, so I built the lesson with the professor. Look at this. There's certain variables. Went to a museum in the last 6 months or 12 months. 223, meaning that they're 123% more likely than the national average to go to a museum or an art museum or did some painting, etc. So having the students look at multiple variables in this particular lesson to, again, try to figure out what the optimal location would be for one of these art dispensing machines. These are highly dependent on foot traffic, so we'll talk about foot traffic here in a bit. But the idea is they're using spatial tools. They're using the most important tool of all, their own brains, their spatially enabled brains, to figure out what the best location would be for 2 of these Artomat dispensing machines, or one machine and the 2 best locations for those machines. So you can see here that the students actually look at satellite imagery so they can see what the streetscape would look like after they've determined which sites would be optimal based on those locations. So they look at multivariate analysis They then pick the 2 sites that are optimal and then actually look at the neighborhoods where they've selected to see, okay, is that really suitable? Because oftentimes just looking at the variables does not tell the whole story. What's the actual neighborhood like? Is it pedestrian friendly? Is it a residential neighborhood? Is it commercial? Is it industrial? So what kind of neighborhood is it? And then I have them reflect on their learning. What did they learn when they did this? So in this particular case, you're looking at multiple variables, and we're just going to change the base map to imagery to look at what do these neighborhoods actually look like. Now, these students were at a university in Philadelphia, so they're familiar with these neighborhoods, but maybe not. And also, if you're using this lesson, you're at a different university or school, again, getting the students understanding what does the actual neighborhood look like. So now that they've conducted their analysis, they actually create a story map at the end, but this story map is not just to build more skills, it's actually to force them, really encourage them into thinking about, how do I communicate my results to others? Whether it's their peers in class and their instructor, but also thinking about the wider community. At some point in their careers, they should think about the wider community, getting stakeholders to care about what they care about. And in the story map, I have a couple of guidelines, but I'm wide open for using a light rubric. In other words, if the students are communicating effectively with the story map and then their narrative, whether it's 5 minutes in a face-to-face setting or in a Zoom session or something like that, or in your learning management system, here's one of those AutoMap machines, what they look like, and here's a sample story map that I created, but I want the students to actually create a more rigorous story map. But inside the story map, make sure that their live interactive 2D and 3D web maps are there that they can use to tell the story about why they selected the neighborhoods that they did for their AutoMat art dispensing machine and not other neighborhoods. So articulating the spatial considerations and the behavioral considerations, the demographic considerations, but using geospatial technology as a key tool to figure out where one of these amazingly retrofitted machines should actually go. So they do some analysis of data. They look at Business Analyst Web App exported into ArcGIS Online in this case. They use some multivariate analysis, and then they create a presentation that's either live or recorded or face-to-face or online. I mean, you've got a lot of flexibility here once these things are created into various videos and learning management systems, forums, and discussion boards and things like that that you can use for communication, but also assessment. So that is an example of how variables and Business Analyst Web App and ArcGIS Online can be used in citing a certain kind of, in this case, art dispensing machine. So it's sort of out of the box. It's one of the reasons why I like this. It's pedestrian friendly, and it is, I think, helps students think critically, think spatially, use geospatial tools, but also communicate the results to others. Thanks for being with me, and I encourage you to use this lesson. Also, the very last thing I have, create a route for a person visiting your 2 proposed sites. Let's say it's your art council, and they would need to visit this. Create a route for them to actually visit these 2 sites. So they're thinking about flows and routing as well, which is another capability inside these tools. Fascinating to be able to do this. Take a look at these variables. You have a lot at your fingertips. I've only selected 4 for this lesson, but I encourage you to dig into these tools. Look at libraries, museums, art galleries, concert halls, and other relevant locations. How the proximity of these locations might influence where you might locate. The reason why I have these questions at the end, typically in these lessons, is we've focused on a certain number of variables. What other variables are we not including? As you know from being instructors, it's a fine line oftentimes between you want to include enough variables where it's realistic, but you don't want to include too many where it's unwieldy and it would take too long in the classroom. So realistic, but at the end I think, okay, let's ask the students, well, what other variables would you think about? Again, this lesson is located on the Location Analytics and Business Education landing page, and I hope you enjoy it and find it intriguing and use it with your students. I'd love to hear how it went. Thanks.